Credentials verified. Welcome back, Commander. Test subject -0B has finally proven a success. Ready for battlefield deployment, approximately.
So, these are the worms directing that assault, using my own cloning tech against me. Smart, but foolish to oppose me at all. Your plans will still fail pitifully. Just as I have now infiltrated your systems, I shall destroy every army you send against me. I warn you, do not allow Flak to grow too strong in your careless efforts. For years, I have used my great power to keep him down, but should his true strength be realized, all of the world will be at his mercy.
Well, that's probably not a good sign. Anyways,
Lunar Knights here. Welcome back to our Flak-only challenge. The rules are simple. I'm trying to beat Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising with only Flak for all of my commanders, but the enemy will still be their normal powerful commanders. If you're new, make sure you watch part 1 first, link up top and in the description. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you like, subscribe to see more, and leave a comment for support or future ideas. Without further ado, let's jump right in. When last we were here, Adder turned back our battleship's advance on the Yellow Comet factory pipeline. We've now returned with a fresh force, this time bringing along our orange, actually red, Flak. The plan this time is a traditional, slower forward assault. Flak 1 will secure the southern landmass, meanwhile Flak 2 will move north to capture an airport before working east. I'll send battleships north to support Flak 2 and target the pipe as well if the opportunity arises. This mission contains a factory that is far from easy reach, meaning that unlike Lash's factory, rushing the entrance to block it is no longer practical, so I'll have to contend with its full might this time. Ground units will always go south toward Flak 1. Meanwhile, air and naval units from it can go west or south toward either of my forces. These two tend to favor south, which provides a potential opportunity for Flak 2 to sneak around the north map border to reach the pipe. I start out with expansion as always to build up my income. This is especially important for Flak 1 to rush the middle base so that I can deploy troops to the front lines both faster and in front of my port. Adder's battleship goes south this time, which I consider the better option in this case because I'll have more income in the south to weather his attacks, and if he decides to ignore me, it means more turns wasted on his end. After APCs and infantry, my first unit will be an anti-air unit since Adder always deploys early B-copters from his factory. The one nice thing about the distance to the factory is that it gives me time to build some counters to some of the most threatening units he might send. I see copters, I build anti-air. I see tanks, I build mech or a tank of my own. This isn't perfect since Adder sends too many units to counter everything, but my first battleships will greatly help the cause since I can zone out some of the scarier units like his medium tank if it rushes early. Thankfully, it doesn't, so I let my battleship start north as an artillery takes its place for zoning. I have the middle base, and now my goal is to still take that forward base. Back with Flak 2, I get lucky that Adder places his battleship in range of a base that I can build an artillery on. He opts to attack rather than retreat, but he can't finish the fight thanks to my terrain defense boost and repairs, so I slowly whittle him down to nothing. This buys time for me to take the airport unopposed, and though Adder sends an anti-air, I already have a tank ready for it. All is setting up perfectly at this point. I hold the line the best I can, snipe subs where I can, and clear a mini-cannon for Flak 2 with my battleship. He's really slow to get rolling, but this gives me time to better lock down the south and continue wearing down Adder's northern defenses with my battleship. Eventually, he reaches the income level to start deploying bombers, which I then fly to victory with time to spare as my southern line looks like it will begin to crumble. As payback for last time, I let my battleship have the final hit on the pipe, and Team Flak takes the win. To Green Earth we march. Drake's Navy mission is first, which should be a challenge for a couple reasons. First of all, I no longer have Drake's boosted navy or his global damage powers. For this naval fleet, my CO power is about as worthless as it can get since I'm only going to be attacking cannons. Hawk gets his colors mixed up to bring us the second point. Flak 2, in orange, will be standing in for the mighty Emperor Convoy. Can Flak's brute force make up for the Samurai spirit and crazy powerful units? Time to find out. This is one of those missions where Commander 2's sole purpose is to hold the line since he has no chance of winning, but it's going to be much harder to do now without those boosted defenses. At least my units are slightly cheaper, even if the quality is much worse. I'm going to take advantage of those cheaper prices to spam infantry and rush for more properties to bolster my income for as long as I can before Hawk takes them back, as he certainly will. In the meantime, my navy will sneak down to begin targeting the big cannons. I get lucky with a safe open spot midway there, and the win is secure in a few turns so long as I can keep Flak 2 from being routed. I'm worried enough about this that I even leave a battleship in the area to provide covering fire. Thankfully, unit spam pays off, and I'm able to delay long enough to take the win, though not before Hawk gets in one last black wave to spite me and do major damage. Oh, and in true Lunar Knights fashion, I would have finished a turn sooner, but one of the cannons managed to survive with only 1 HP left. Yep, this is my life now. I ignore Eagle's Fortress mission for the same reason I did Grid's Tank Brigade, to go straight for Jess's Battleship one. If you didn't see the Fortress challenge I did, I'd highly recommend checking that one out after this video to see some more struggling. It was one of my toughest single mission challenge attempts so far that wasn't connected to a larger run. Jess's mission is one I know inside and out, with a level of detail that's far more than I should have. Or at least, it would be if this mission weren't so critical to advancing Green Earth. With that power strengthening me, it's a cakewalk even with Flak. I finished the mission with a tank for fun, and of course grabbed the lab map. I'm going to say it now, I'm terrified of this lab mission. I know I mentioned worry before on previous ones, but Green Earth's lab mission doesn't mess around. It pulls no punches and has no mercy. Even playing normally, its difficulty is a huge spike over everything else in Green Earth, except for maybe the factory mission. That brings us to, the volcano. I skipped this one a lot, but it's probably a good one for showing off Flak versus Hawk in direct combat before we reach the factory. In the naval mission, I simply had to hold off, and I was barely doing that. Now, I'm going to need to push through tight choke points against an opponent with boosted stats and the power to do global damage and healing at the same time. This is another mission I have intimate knowledge of, and I know from painful experience that Hawk favors sending his troops south. To this end, I focus everything north, leaving only a skeleton defense around my base. They will fall, but their purpose is just to buy me time to breach Hawk's northern line. It's, not the most exciting battle because I spend more time moving my troops than actually fighting because of how much ground there is to cover. But I do manage to poke through, place units on his bases so he can't spawn more, and then capture his HQ to end the battle. The end quote was well worth the effort. This is such a mood. With this done, I decide to take a swing at the lab mission thinking it could potentially be a quick one, since at most it takes 9 days. And well, I'm not going to lie to you here folks, I got slapped pretty hard. This is one of those missions that is commonly done with Eagle or Jess, and I've never heard of it being completed with Drake, who is our closest equivalent commander. My personal preference normally is Eagle because I like to use his superpower to take a second turn and grab a lab capture. I don't even know how many units are hiding on this map, but there's a whole mess of them deep in the Fog of War forests. The opening is scary because of Flak's tendency to hit like a wet noodle when you need big damage. I survived, and tried to go for a capture like usual since I'm lacking Jess's damage and bonus movement, but I only barely breached the pipe before I run out of time. I would have needed 2 more days to win, which is a significant amount of time in a mission this tight. It's such a hard hit that I know right away I need to step back and try a new plan. I take a break to go to the mission where Eagle rescues Sammy, but it was very late at that point, and after making some especially sloppy plays from tiredness, I take that as my cue to rest and strategize. I return to the lab mission with a new passion, but also the burning question of whether or not this is really even possible to beat. I've heard of Jess winning this mission through routing, and though I've never played it that way myself, it seemed the only chance I was going to have. In the subsequent failed attempts, I slowly scout out the forest mass to learn what units are on the map, as where as well they like to hide. More than a few times I lose, with what I presume to be only 1 or 2 units left. But after enough tries to refine my strategy and getting the lucky hits I need, I eventually secure a win. In the winning clip, you can actually kinda tell how anxious I was that there was another unit around by how I first tried to destroy this APC with my tank so that I could have my bomber available in case I needed to sprint for somewhere else. Not that realistically that would have been enough, since I've used up most of my turn already. Who would have thought that Flak could actually beat this one? Well done, Flak. Well done. I was going to return to Eagle's mission, but instead I decided to go to Drake's second mission because Flak is game-changing here, and I didn't want to miss this opportunity. Normally, it's a battle of Navy versus Hawk's Air, But this is one of those special times where Flak alters how the mission can be played. The start is the same as always, except that I take more damage, but by rushing right, it's possible to claim an airport in the north. Typically with Drake, the only reason to do this is to deny it from Hawk, since Drake's air units are the worst in the game, so you'd never want to deploy them if you have any other options. Flak's units are equal across the board, however, since his flaw stems from his luck mechanic. This means that his air units are just as viable as other units, and I can deploy a mixed force. I've never truly done that on this mission before, and though I was still pretty slow to deploy my first air units because I was focusing towards ground units for assaulting Hawk's spawn, once I did start sending in the Skyforce, it ended up being a lot of fun. Their addition allows me to put a 3-way pincer movement on Hawk to crush his last stand quicker than ever before. Only the factory remains now, our final barrier to the liberation of Green Earth. It's time to pull out all of the stops and unleash our full power for the first time ever. What that means is we shall be combining the holy trinity of Advance Wars commanders to unlock the most powerful synergy never seen before.
I can't believe we couldn't get arena tickets for this match! Now we'll have to watch the duel on the view screen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I draw your attention to the dueling ring. Here, combatants will battle for your viewing and gambling enjoyment.
In slot 1, sporting some rather stylish goggles, we have the Arbiter of Abs, the Titan of Tutorials. Put your hands together for Flak! In slot 2, sporting the same pair of goggles, we have the ringleader of rolled back sleeves, the conqueror of both good and bad luck, and the only commander smart enough to wear a hard helmet in an active war zone. Let me hear a thunderous applause for Flak! And in slot 3 we have...
Are you sure this is the right script? This guy looks like the same as the other two. They're supposed to? Management says to keep going? Alright, if you say so.
And in slot 3, his fists are larger than his head, but don't let that fool you. He's a tactical genius, one of the greatest minds Macroland has ever seen. Someone call him Legion, for he is many. Let's send up a warm welcome to Flak. Alright, here we are. This is one of those missions that starts out slow, but if you give Hawk enough time, it really ramps up and becomes a long slog to push your way to the pipe. To that end, I've gathered our best commander team yet, and we're going to try and blitz this. The game lore actually tells us that the original Flak was promoted to commander rank by none other than Hawk himself because he was impressed by his natural ability. Now it's time for our Flaks to promote themselves by taking out their former management. For clarity here, before we get too deep, Flak 1 will be green as always. Flak 2 is sporting orange star colors, and Flak 3 is blue. I'll start the match by having Flak 2 rush to the far missile on the top of the map so that I can deny Hawk from using it. My primary target will be an early fighter and capturing infantry. Flak 1 and 3 will do nothing of note, simply saving up funds for now. Flak 1 will be the next to make an important purchase. In this case, a fighter that I'm going to use to escort a bomber strike force once I save up enough for it. This mission heavily favors Eagle and air units for the Green Earth slot because of how much ground I need to cover. I can still build air units to great effect, but there's one serious problem that comes into play. When in the air units always use a few fuel points just to stay aloft, even if they don't move that turn. This number changes based on the unit, but both bombers and fighters use 5 points of fuel a day. It's often overlooked, but Eagle actually has a secondary ability that causes his air units to use 2 fewer points of fuel daily, meaning that they're able to travel a bit further and stay up longer without a refuel compared to other commanders. Realistically, this is rarely a big deal because in most matches, it's not hard to reach an airport or refuel with an APC. On a map as large as this, however, fuel becomes a serious issue because once I move a unit all the way into Flak's territory, I won't have the fuel nor time to bring it back. Thus, this is an expensive one-way trip for every air unit I send out. I also have less power in them comparatively, so while a full health Eagle bomber can destroy a black cannon in one turn, it will take Flak's bombers 2 turns to do so. One extra turn exposed and vulnerable, as well as losing precious fuel. Oh, and somewhere around this time Flak 3 will build a lander and rockets to start a long journey east and then north. This will take a while, and they're completely vulnerable to any attack in the meantime. I'm also purchasing strong tanks for Flak 1 that I'm hiding in the lower cities. Flak 2's main job is just to use up the northern missiles. Beyond that, they simply need to survive. I'm going to try and build as few units as possible there in hopes that Hawk won't be able to use his CO power at all this match. Flak 1 reaches the cannons, and I need that extra time to destroy them, which really delays my progress because until I take out the furthest mini cannon, I can't attack the other one or the main cannon. Once they're down, the way is clear for Flak 3 to make landfall and start pushing north. My top priority now will be guarding that rocket unit at all costs. I also brought along an infantry to try and capture the base here as a fallback, but with the force heading my way, I'm not gambling on that chance. My air units are starting to get low on fuel, which means I won't have my escort for much longer. I use the units lowest on fuel as my front line as fodder to draw attacks and try sending more fighters to the front, but it takes me several days to move even a single one that far, so I need to make the few that do make it really count. By this point, Hawk's forces are really ramping up and he's spreading out across the map with terrifying power. His turns take forever because of it. I need to make every movement and every missile I fire count. I also have to be careful to only move my air units once without canceling with B because that will waste valuable fuel. Several tense turns pass and my rockets make it into position below the pipe. I even get the base surprisingly and deploy more. My strategy here is to use the rockets to snipe the pipe. There's a cannon there, but the AI always targets the unit with the highest cost, so I place a fighter there to buy me a free turn. The next turn, I'm able to destroy the pipe. I usually take a little time after destroying a factory to talk about the run's progress, but I haven't done that so far this run because it's been pretty straightforward, so I'll take a moment now. Most of the other continents haven't been all that bad. Flak is definitely the worst commander in the game, there's no doubt there, and you can feel that in maps that it's tougher as well as that it's harder to reliably strategize when you can't accurately estimate your damage. But he's far from unusable since he still has access to every unit, and they're not default bad. You're just gambling with every engagement. Green Earth was where I felt the difficulty properly rise, and these missions had a nice tension to them as I played, but in a way where they didn't feel unfair. The lab mission was especially challenging, and maybe the one exception there. I genuinely was having doubts over whether it'd even be possible. Speaking of possible, we're now off to the final two missions of the game. It's time for our Flaks to face off against their former employer, the most powerful commander in the game, Sturm. The first of these missions is always a simpler one. I have full control of the lower half of the map, and since Sturm's forces are trapped inside pipes, I have all the time in the world to build up my assault force. Despite being second to last, it's a very chill map. My objective is to destroy the 3 black cannons at the top. When you play this map with normal commanders, you can use Grit for his extra rockets range, which allows you to snipe the cannons without ever needing to breach the pipes. I don't have that luxury here. I need to breach the first pipe to get into range, which means I'll be spending more time in danger range, unleashing half of his powerful forces, and that I'll need to contend with those annoying lasers inside a choke point. This mission marks my first engagement with Storm's forces as well. And, let's just say that we are not on equal footing. The few units that I do have are a poignant warning of what's to come in the next mission. He has boosted defense, offense, and ignores terrain. I have mixed luck. When we arrive at the final mission in the game, I am definitely scared. My first attempt confirms this will be no easy task. For this first attempt, I try out a bomber rush strategy that's usually used with Colin in the center. It's pretty cheesy normally, but I need all of the help I can get right now. It fails immediately when I'm unable to protect my bomber from the black cannons, since by playing the same commanders, all of my costs are the same and I can't divert fire from the bomber. I still tried to bring the 5 HP bomber north, but there's an anti-air unit that destroys it. In this footage, you can see I accidentally got hit by the laser and had even less HP by the time that happened, but it wouldn't have made a difference since my bomber would have still been one-shotted. Alright, now that we know that's not going to work, let's step back and analyze this mission a little. My goal is to destroy the laser cannon at the bottom of the big missile platform. This laser can fire in a straight line that covers 3 tiles every 7 turns. The mission is also timed, and I have only 27 days to do this. Sturm doesn't have any factories, thankfully, but he has such a ridiculous level of income that it will feel like he does. I have 3 Flaks that are too far from each other to provide reliable direct support. Sturm can comfortably steamroll all 3 of them, even with careful tactics. So the longer the match goes, the worse it will get for me. A long, slow push is not an option. A rapid bomber rush is not an option. This means that if there's a chance, it's going to fall into some mid-ground sweet spot. With how much distance I need to cross, bombers still look like my only option. This is much easier said than done. One of the best strategies on this map is to place a highly defensive or spam commander in the center, such as Grit or Colin, and then to place 2 heavy-hitting offensive hitters on the wings. Max and Eagle are two of the most common picks. Max for his direct damage boost, and Eagle for his boosted air units. Both of them can then be used for an effective bomber strike, while also having the firepower to not get crushed by Sturm in the process. Even their boosts still put them below Sturm's power threshold. So when we take a normal commander, or even worse, a normal commander with bad luck, we're definitely on the low ground, and we all know what happens then.
It's over, Flak. I have the high ground.
I'd like to say I have some master plan at this point that I'm going to use to give me an edge, or even the odds, but this time, I don't. Flak just can't stand up against Sturm in direct combat, especially when my movements are so limited by the two black cannons in the center of the map, and the laser. To win this battle is going to take good old-fashioned precision micro. It's not reassuring, but in a way, I don't think I'd want this final battle to go any other way. It will be a raw test of skill, luck, and the greatest opportunity for Flak to prove himself as a commander. Initial runs only prove what I've already suspected regarding how engagements go, and that I'm on a timer that isn't actually the official timer. This isn't just about survival for anyone but Green Flak. I need to push, and push before the literal Flak is too hot. Oh, and every reset takes a while because I need to force change my commanders again. So that's a thing. It takes a while, and I'm not sure how many resets I went through, some of which got extremely close, but eventually around 2 AM one morning, I get the winning run. It goes like this. We start out with some standard expansion to build up funds. On the closest run before this, I'd failed because Green Flak was overwhelmed and routed, so this time I'm going to spam as many units in his territory as I can. Of course, making a point to move them out of the laser's firing zone so that they don't get hit. They will fall, but their purpose is simply to buy as much time as possible. Sturm may hit hard, but he can still only hit one unit at a time per unit. Mechs and B-copters will be my top priority for their cheap price but decent effectiveness. Orange and Blue Flak are going to rush out a bomber with 25 days remaining. They will each go north through their closest pipe seam to hopefully sneak around on a long trek toward the laser. Last time, Orange was the closest to succeeding and would have done so in 2 turns if not for the rout, so I'm betting my cards on him. Sturm has an unfortunate habit of building a fighter on Blue Flak's side, which he does again this time, zoning my bomber's advance there. The laser first fires on Sturm's turn with 24 days remaining and hits nothing. I continue to build my numbers in the south, adding in a fighter for the oncoming bomber and because it's great for blocking a tile. Orange gets a fighter as well to help escort the bomber just in case, and both sides expand where they can so that they will last longer, even though the bombers I'm betting on are already on the field. Missiles can help weaken my enemy when it's most valuable, and Blue will simply get an anti-air gun because it's all I can afford. Orange is soon through his pipe, though I am really betting on that push considering Blue is already starting to look sketchy. His bomber will take damage this turn. I try to capture the base and airport above Orange's base for reinforcements, but Sturm builds a tank that will prove to be quite obnoxious thanks to his high defense. Still, it looks like I'll have the area secured next turn, providing a valuable vantage for the rest of my assault. It's then that disaster strikes. Sturm activates his superpower and drops his meteor right on my Orange strike team. It does 8 points of damage to everything it hits, crippling that force beyond use as anything more than blockers. I have another bomber trying to move north already, and a third I build from my newly acquired airport, but this is falling apart fast. I'm no longer able to capture that base, but maybe I can at least block it. In the meantime, Blue's bomber has survived with some damage, and I keep pushing it forward. I tried an attempt to get the base and airport here too, but it was a very clear lost effort early on, so I didn't even bother using the bomber to support it. The fighting is tense for Green Flak, but I built up so many mech units by this point that his line is still holding relatively strong. I was even able to branch his B-copters out to support Orange Flak. With Orange, I abandoned my efforts at the base to sprint my bombers forward, sacking one to badly damaged anti-air while the other heads into a choke point area. It's trench run time now. There's a damaged fighter in repair mode heading toward it that I'm chasing with my blue bomber now. It's pretty silly to see, but my hope is that if the fighter repairs, I'll be able to use my blue bomber as bait while Orange strikes the laser. I'm still betting on that full health Orange bomber because I know that if it reaches its destination, it can destroy its target in only 2 hits. A B-copter blocks my path, so I pull back and free my airport hoping that it will move out of the way for me to sneak around. I build another bomber, but Sturm has now built an anti-air on that base I couldn't lock down. This is very bad, but maybe I can survive a hit from it with a few HP points. Blue continues his chase, now running low on fuel. A fighter is also following for support since the only thing better than baiting Sturm's fighter would be to actually destroy it. Sturm's B-copter moves. Into the next checkpoint.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Again, I am blocked. I try to scare it away with my fighter while moving my healthy bomber to a safer spot, but this is looking dire. A meteor strike next turn certainly doesn't help, and that annoying B-copter holds still, blocking me again. There's nothing Red can do but sit and wait, hoping it will move. I have one last gamble to make before I call this a loss. Somehow, Blue has managed to slip into Sturm's final area. His bomber is badly damaged with only 6 HP and threatening to fall out of the sky from low fuel. But maybe, just maybe, it pushes on through its trench run, and to my surprise, it's able to do 57 points of damage despite how battered it is. I take my shot. It's now or never. There's a rocket unit in the area, but not in range. If I needed 3 hits, it'd be lost for sure. But now, so long as my enemy doesn't move his fighter to attack, we can do this.
You underestimate my power!
Don't try it.
His turn comes, long and tense. A scary missile even gets fired off, but thankfully it lands elsewhere. The turn continues. Units of all my colors fall left and right. And then... it ends. The fighter has not moved. Fast forward to Blue, I activate my power for Flare, fail to defeat that damaged fighter, and then destroy the laser at long last. The little blue bomber that could has done it all for us. Wow. We did it. Team Flak did it. Let me tell you, the hype was real here. It didn't look like it would be possible toward the end, but here we are. Despite the odds, despite being the worst commander in the game, Flak has shown his might and liberated, all of Macroland. As the credits roll to show off scores, I can say that this was a satisfying run. Aside from a few missions, it's not as hardcore as some of the other challenge runs out there, but that doesn't mean it's not a great time. It's actually really fun just rolling the dice with every attack, especially when your superpower is active and you don't know what kind of hit you're going to get. I actually found that often when I was in tense situations, I'd ignore my super because it was just too unreliable. Yes, when it's active you should statistically hit higher most of the time, but those low rolls are rough and can absolutely ruin a turn. If you're looking for a challenge run to test yourself, but without the stress of wanting to throw your screen across the room or the fear of going insane, I'd recommend this one. It's weird, but it's a good time. Anyways, our final rank for the campaign is... S rank. Didn't think I'd get that high this time. If you enjoyed this run, you might also like this one here. Otherwise, I'll see you and Flak again in the hard campaign. Lunar Knights, signing off.